I have a lot of confidence in not only myself, but our team and the scouts that we have. We're a very talented group of guys, and they know where the standard's at. And I laughed. I mean, almost, last year we don't ever let anybody else set our expectations. I mean, fuck that. We set our expectations, and it's almost, people are so scared of the unknown. They're all scared when you go with the unknown. Well, we're not. We're not scared to draft. We're not scared to bring in players that others might disagree with and still win football games. I mean, I just think that at the end of the day, we set expectations internally, and that's how we're going to roll.
Starting with a quote from Chris Ballard today. That was Colts general manager Chris Ballard on his plans for the draft and how he views what he's done in the draft the past couple of seasons and what he expects going into this year. And I don't think that anything that has happened this year, the success that they've had, is going to change his mindset on moving forward. It's still going to be the same as when he went into the last draft. They have high expectations for themselves. Obviously, they're wanting to outdo what they did last year, obviously, but you have to look at it as we're going to find players that fit the organization, that fit the mold of the Colts culture, and we're going to bring them in and they're going to be playmakers. And if they're not, then we move on from them. There have been times where Ballard in the past 2 drafts has missed on guys and he's had to move on. There are some examples that I'll go into here as I go through his past 2 drafts with the Colts leading into this one. And the real question, how good is Chris Ballard and how good has he done as a general manager? I'm just going to look at it today from this standpoint of the draft, that I'm going to look at the past 2 drafts, the 2017 and 2018 draft, kind of what he did. I'll lay out the picks and we'll kind of look into what he could have maybe done better, the guys that he didn't pick, but these are 2 really good drafts, so I don't have a lot of negative things to say about either of these 2. Starting in 2017, obviously you had your 15th pick overall, and you chose Malik Hooker, and he is now one of the centerpieces for that defense. He has had, his ACL injury that has, limited him at the end of his rookie season, and I think that leading into last season that there were kind of some times where he looked a little rusty, although I think that the times that he did have to make impacts, whether that be, providing tight coverage on receivers, not allowing the quarterback to throw it, or you're breaking up passes, getting in there and flying across the field to try and make tackles. He's your center field guy, and that's what Ballard wanted. That's what he was at Ohio State. And he really is your ball hawk. He was more in his 2017 season, and it looked even better, in my opinion, after the 2017 season than 2018. But I still have a lot of love for Malik Hooker. I think he's a very good player there at the safety position for the Colts, and a great first-round pick as we look back 2 years later in hindsight. The second-round pick for the Colts there was Quincy Wilson. Obviously, he's one of your more developed corners now. He's really stepping up and growing as an NFL player. He got under the wing of Mike Mitchell this season, and I think has learned a lot from the older guys within the secondary and has learned a lot going to the NFL. He's had to mature. He's had to grow up and realize that he's on an NFL team now, and I think that he's making strides in the right direction as he mostly plays the nickel spot right now. But as injuries have flared up over the past 2 seasons, he's had to step into bigger roles at times, and I don't think he's done a bad job. So definitely worth the second-round pick there. So two picks there in your first 2 rounds that are quality starters for you now. And looking ahead of the 2018 draft, that was the same thing. So I really think that that's where Chris Ballard is going to really look to hammer in on this draft of these first 2 picks. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, so I'm going to keep going on with the 2017 draft. But the first two picks in this draft are key players. The third round pick for the Colts in 2017 was Terrell Basham, an edge player that is obviously, he stepped in at times and played a role, and he's had some shining moments. In the 2018 season, I think he took a step back, even though he had some moments where he was in there. But for a third round pick at this point, you're looking at that pick with a little bit of skepticism, as if that is going to work out. I hope that it does. I think that he's made strides in the right direction. It looks like he's working hard in the offseason, and it's definitely not to the point where you're looking on from Terrell Basham, but you need an answer there at that edge spot. And 2 years later, he really hasn't provided all that you need there. So the fourth round here, this is where he whiffed on. This was Zach Banner, the offensive tackle, and he's no longer with the Colts. He whiffed on it, didn't work out, but he moved on, and that was okay. And I think that that's always going to happen in the draft. It's not going to be 100% perfect all the time. So the fact that Ballard was able to assess that did not work out and move on, and obviously now the offensive line is kind of what he wanted when he was drafting a guy like Zach Banner. But he just took the loss and moved on, and the Colts are better for it. The fourth round, the 143rd pick, is where they got the gem. This is Marlon Mack that they got out of South Florida. And I remember when the Colts drafted him, immediately I looked up his highlight tape because I didn't know who he was. And his highlight tape was amazing. There at South Florida, he had a lot of long runs. He was a speedy back. He still is a speedy back. And obviously a great pick for you, as he is now your number one running back without a doubt. So 2 years later, that pick is looking like one of your best ones in the draft, honestly. Malik Hooker was your duh pick, but Marlon Mack in the fourth round, and now he's your number one running back, and who Ballard and Reich think very highly of. So that was another great pick by Ballard and his team. Fourth round was Grover Stewart, defensive tackle. He has played a lot for the Colts in the past 2 seasons. Has he been a huge impact player? In my opinion, no. But he has been the body guy that you need when, so many people on the defensive line have been, hurt. They've been pushed around. Everybody's moved around. They've tried everything. And especially last year with Eberflus, he played a role, but was not one of the main contributors there on the defensive line. Although I still think that here, the fourth round, it was your late fourth round pick, still not bad, as he, could develop here, but he's definitely been a key contributor for you so far. Your fifth round pick was Nate Hairston, and he's probably your fourth best corner on the team right now, behind your Kenny Moore, your Quincy Wilson, and your Pierre Desir. So I think for your fifth round pick, that he's coming along nicely. I think there's still, I still think there's a big need for corner on the Colts, but I think that Nate Hairston has come in, and with the revolving door at corner, with injuries flaring up all over the place, that he's come in and he's played some solid minutes for you. But, has also given up some plays, in my opinion. So I'm not huge on Nate Hairston, but I'm not going to fault Ballard for that pick. I still think that it was good, as he's been, your third or fourth best corner for the past 2 years or so. And then your fifth round, your last pick in the 2017 draft was Anthony Walker, who is now side by side with your Darius Leonard there in the middle. A great pick. That was another one that was kind of like finding a gem there in the late fifth round. So credit to Ballard for finding him and bringing him aboard. He has been nothing but good, I think, for the Colts, as he had a kind of a shaky rookie season, and he really stepped it up next to, his friend Darius Leonard there. And this defense is just coming more and more together. So looking at that draft, I think that there was really only one bust, and that was Zach Banner. And, you look at these other guys like Terrell Basham and Grover Stewart, and they're not busts, but they're just not, the star players that I'm looking for. They obviously are key contributors on the team, and nothing technically against them, but yeah, especially for your Terrell Basham, I think that Ballard was looking for a guy that could be a little bit more contributor there at edge, and that's why he, ended up taking Toure and Tyquan Lewis in the 2018 draft. So I'm not alone in my thoughts there on that. Luke, moving on to the 2018 draft, obviously the first round he had Quentin Nelson going first overall, a franchise changer, if you will. He's just played about perfect as he's come in. I think he only gave up 2 sacks himself on the entire year, and has been a centerpiece for this offensive line with everybody else that they've brought in. And he's the dominating presence that you want. He was, the highest rated offensive guard coming into the draft in 20 years or so going into the draft. So the fact that Ballard was able to get your early second round pick for this year and, move back and still get this guy, unbelievable. So Ballard's move there to move back, get your other pick that's helping us now, and get Quentin Nelson, who you were probably going to pick anyway. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work by Ballard and company there. That's obviously what you want. And the second pick, obviously, Darius Leonard. So like I said earlier, the first 2 picks of the last draft, 2017, were key contributors. Well, even more so in 2018, as 2 of your best players really on the team, or top 10 for sure, were taken in the 2018 draft. And now they're coming into their sophomore season. Darius Leonard led the NFL in tackles. He is a complete freak. Him and Quentin Nelson were first team All-Pro in the NFL. And obviously the Leonard was snubbed for the Pro Bowl, but who cares about that anyway? A great pick by Ballard. Everybody was mocking him at the time. But like he said in the intro, he believes in his team, and they're not going to care about what outside people think. That, people thought that was way too early for Darius Leonard out of a small D1 school that got 0 national attention basically, but he had conviction and his team believed, and Darius Leonard is now one of your franchise pieces moving forward. And this second round pick, you had 4 in this 2018 draft. The next one, the 37th pick, was Braden Smith, who was a guard for Auburn. He has now come in and he's your starting right tackle and has played almost as good as your big Q. He is just, he's underappreciated. Obviously, there's a lot of studs on that offensive line now, but this guy has really solidified that position. And now Ballard and his team can be like, okay, well, we got our starting right tackle moving forward. He's on his rookie contract. He's cheap. And these guys have played really well together. So in your first 3 picks there, you have your two of your best offensive linemen right there. And just unbelievable that Braden Smith, credit to Ballard, but credit to Braden Smith for coming in and being able to make the change to tackle. Not everybody can do that. So that's awesome. He knew that there was a role to fill, and he was up to the challenge, and it's worked out. The second round pick for the Colts in this draft was Kemoko Toure. And this is another guy kind of like your Basham, where he's had his moments and then he didn't play a whole lot. And this is kind of the one where you're thinking, is this kind of a bust? You look at the next pick here, that Tyquan Lewis. Basically, they're playing the same position there. And I think that Tyquan Lewis, even after his injury, has come in and played a little bit bigger of a role there. I think that Tyquan Lewis is inevitably better than Toure. And he's had a little bit more success on field. I don't think that Toure got the snaps that he maybe should have at the latter part of the season last year. They had the reasons for that. They, went 10-1 in the latter half of the season. So obviously it was working what they had, But I think that he still could have played a little bit more. I mean, he was just playing like 10% of the snaps or less, even less than that in the final games. So just kind of weird there. As you know, a high pick, 57th pick overall, is just kind of, you know, at a standstill. But he was still a rookie, and that's not a busted pick by any means yet. Moving out of the second round for that draft was moving into the fourth round. Nyheim Hines was taken here at the 104th overall pick, and he has, in my eyes right now, he's your number 2 back. You know, I think that you draft a running back or bring in one. You know, I don't think that you're content with the 3 guys that you have now. But he's been, for a rookie and a 4th round pick, he had some great production, especially as a receiver. You know, he had, I think, north of 60 receptions this season, which is really crazy to think about. Looking at, you know, how often Luck threw to Mack or Wilkins, you know, it wasn't a whole lot compared to him. So credit to him for getting open. You know, he had some issues with ball security and stuff, but hey, he's a rookie and he's a 4th round pick. But credit to Ballard for finding that one. He played a lot, especially when Marlon Mack was injured earlier in the season. So Nyheim Hines, that was a great pick there in the 4th round. The 5th round pick, the 159th, had Reese Fountain coming to the Colts, and this more and more is kind of like, well, Reese, you need to prove it, buddy. And there's a reason why he wasn't put onto the team, and it just kind of was captivating to see him drop a touchdown in their final game against the Chiefs and, you know, garbage time. So I don't know. I think he's going to have to prove it in training camp, or they're going to have to move on, because I think you're going to have to draft a wide receiver in this draft too. I've obviously had him, you know, drafting AJ Brown and N'Keal Harry. So where's Reese Fountain fit? Well, I don't really know, you know. So I like the kid. You know, I think he's kind of a fan favorite. People want to see him succeed, but he just hasn't. So at me looking at it objectively, you know, that's something that might have to go down as a loss, but we'll see. I'm not counting him out just yet. The next pick, the 169th, was Jordan Wilkins, another guy with Nyheim Hines that was brought into the Colts to try to help with the running situation. And I think he did a pretty good job. He had some times, you know, I think that I was at the Dolphins game when the Colts had ultimate momentum and they were driving down the field. I think the score was 7-0 at the time, and the Colts were driving on the Dolphin side of the field. I think that it was a swing pass out to Wilkins, and he makes a man miss. He had the first down, and he dives to the ground and fumbles, and Dolphins get it, and momentum all goes to the Dolphins. And I hate to remember just one moment like that with Wilkins, but there were some other issues with ball security with your Nyheim Hines that really bothered me. But I think I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and they were rookies, and I think that is one thing, if anything, that they need to work on, both of them, is the ball security moving forward. But a great pick by Ballard, as he obviously has come in and had touchdowns for you this year. The 6th round pick, the 185th, this was the unfortunate one. Deon Cain, he looked like a future star in training camp. First preseason game, tears his ACL, out for the season. I really, really have high hopes for him. I hope he comes in and he's, an answer for you there at receiver. I don't know how much faith they have in him. I don't know how much faith you can have in a guy like that who you really haven't seen any production, but he had a lot of potential. So I really pulling for Deon Cain. I hope he's everything that he was going to be last year before he got hurt. So, and here in the 7th round, had 2 linebackers, Matthew Adams and Zaire Franklin. These guys were kind of some special teams role players. They came in and played some minutes at linebacker. Zaire Franklin, I remember making some plays, and Matthew Adams, he was a hard hitter. And I think that these guys do have some upsides. And for being 7th-round picks, I think that their role on special teams and coming in, when Zaire Franklin, I believe, started in place of Darius Leonard in the Patriots game. Could be wrong on that. It could have been Adams, but they were playing significant roles in those games, and they did okay. So looking at the 2017 draft, you got gems. You got your gem and Marlon Mack. You got your Anthony Walker in the 5th round. You have your, Malik Hooker and Quincy Wilson that are key players on the defense moving forward. So a great draft there by Ballard in 2017. I think it probably isn't as good when it's compared right next to the 2018 draft with your Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, Braden Smith, Tyquan Lewis, Naeem Hines, Jordan Wilkins, Deion Kane. These guys have, aside from Deion Kane, these guys have really played big roles for the Colts in the last season, and are going to play bigger roles moving forward. And, your top 2 picks in the last 2 drafts, that's what I'm looking at. Those are going to be big time picks this year too. I really look for those 2 guys that he picks in the 1st and 2nd round this year to be big contributors for the Colts, just like the past 2 drafts. So I really like that. And I think that, your 2017, if I had to put a grade on it, I think you probably B+, A- for the 2017. I think you got a lot out of that. The Zach Banner and Basham there in the 3rd and 4th round are kind of where you kind of dock it just a smidge. But 2018, in my opinion, A or an A+, they knocked it out of the park with what they did there, having to move back to get Nelson. It was perfect, and it's helping the Colts now, which is great. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about today with the draft and what Chris Ballard has done. Obviously, it's been a huge part of what the Colts, are wanting to do moving forward. And he's going to look at these 2 drafts and use that as a blueprint for what he wants to do this year. And I thought that looking at the 2017 draft, that the 6 of the 8 picks were on the defensive side of the ball. And the 2018 draft was 5 defensive players and 6 offensive players. So a more well-rounded draft in the 2018 draft. And, in the 2017, he had a more of a focus on the defense, which he certainly should have. And I think that this year it will probably be more of a defensive draft too. I think that, the majority will be defensive players, as, your offensive players really, for what you have right now, are kind of set, aside from wide receiver and, and maybe if you want to bring in a tight end or an offensive tackle and I guess a running back, but really everything else is set. So I think that, looking at this, I think he's going to have a thoughts about going defensive again. And that's really what I've had in these mock drafts. And I have one more mock draft that I want to talk about today before I end the podcast. So I'll go into that. This was another one that I did on the draftnetwork.net or .com. So, that this one had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from South Florida falling to the Colts at 26 for me to pick. This is one that didn't fall to 26 a lot. So looking at that, that might be a guy that, if Ballard right now is thinking at all that he would want to trade up and he's wanting to get a safety, if he's not sure what to do with Clayton Gathers after this 1-year deal, that this guy from Florida could be your guy next to Malik Hooker. I've said that I've liked, the Nazir Adderley and the Jonathan Abrams got safeties in the draft. This guy, I think, is a little bit of a step up from those, as those to me are kind of your 2nd round guys that you could be looking for with the 34th pick. But Chauncey Gardner-Johnson will not be there at 34th, and he'll probably not even be there at 26, but he was here, and I wanted to talk about him a little bit because I thought that I really like this guy. He had a 4.48 40, so pretty good there with what you want as far as 40 time there. He was 5'11", 210, so a pretty NFL size safety. I don't think that looking at his stature when you look at him on the field, I don't think he looks too small or anything like that. I think that he could come into the NFL and about what he is at now and be okay. Looking at his tape, he's just very athletic. He's got a lot of playmaking skills. He, I think the biggest tape to look at him was in the Peach Bowl against Michigan in his last game. He had 2 interceptions and 1 pick six in that game, and he kind of stole the show there on defense for Florida. He had 4 interceptions total in 2018 and nine in his career. So looking at some of the safeties, he definitely had more of the interceptions than kind of some of the ones that were falling in the Colts' way that I've seen in my research. He covers tight ends pretty well, and that's really what I'm looking for when I'm looking at a safety. Is I think the Colts really have struggled to find a guy that covers the tight ends. I think that Darius Leonard has done a good job at covering your tight ends, but I don't think you always want him back in coverage like that. So if you get a guy like Johnson here who can be, can come up and cover your tight ends, like I've said with like Jonathan Abrams can do that as well, that could be really something that you're looking. And he's a big advocate of the run support. So, I mean, he'll fly across the field. And when I think of that, I think of the Colts or what they were last year and what Eberflus had. So, he's a big run supporter. He hits behind the line of scrimmage. He's flying to the ball. He has no hesitancy as a striker. So he just, will lay out his body. He's very competitive. So he just wants to give it his all. He doesn't look like a guy that, holds anything back. So that's really what I like a lot about him. The cons that I saw for him were that he does kind of tend to step up in coverage. So I don't, if that means going into the box or just like kind of stepping up and allowing, I guess, for people to get behind him. That's kind of his con. And I think that's something that Malik Hooker there that would be next to him doesn't do. So if you're looking for a guy like this, that he could be, put him in the box, put him as a box safety. He's versatile. He's kind of done it all in college. So I think that he could do that and, have him kind of move around a little bit, but put him in the box and allow him to be, the run stopper, the extra linebacker, if you will. And, if you need him to play coverage, he's just fine at that too, even though there were times like in the Georgia game, he overcommitted twice. I think there was one on like a double route. And then there was one, I think it was on play action where he just stepped up and then got beat. So that's not something that you like. And he did have a few more missed tackles than I'd like to see. And he only had 71 last year. So that could be an issue, as I don't like to see missed tackles. So that's something that I don't like about him. But I think he's probably the best safety in the draft. He's definitely top 2, top 3. So if the Colts are looking for that safety pick, if that's what they want, I don't know if they're looking for that edge guy, the defensive tackle or safety there or corner, whatever they want to bring in this first pick. But if they're going safety, this is really one that could change your franchise. In my opinion, I think he's that good. I think he's well-rounded. He has no red flags, and he's a guy that can step in and, start right away. I don't know, with Clayton Gathers, if you'd have him starting right away, but he would definitely be a contributor as, you're rotating the safeties kind of in and out too. The 34th pick, I had Jerry Tillery, who I won't talk about a whole lot because I've already talked about him. He's the guy from Notre Dame, 6'6", over 300 pounds, had, I think, 14 career sacks. A pretty well-rounded player there that you're looking at 34th or your 26th pick. If he falls to the 34th, which I don't know if he will, but very good possibility, then that would be a great pick there at 34th. I would like that a lot better, obviously, than your 26. This way, you're getting the the sure safety, the sure secondary player, as well as you're getting a guy that you really could overpick at 26 anyway. So that's one I really liked. The 59th pick in this mock draft, I had Kelvin Harmon. This is a guy I really wanted to talk about and one that I didn't get to pick a whole lot in my other mock drafts. This is a guy that had a very good college career. He had 86 catches and 1,200 yards receiving last year in 2017, as well as 7 touchdowns. He's 6'2", 221, so he's got great size as a receiver. There's a concern with his 40-yard dash time as he ran a 4.6, so that's not great, as you know, he could probably struggle against some of the more speedy corners. But if he looking at his tape, how he's gotten past some of the speed issues has been probably his ability to get rid of the press at the line. So he'll use his hands, he'll use stutter steps. He's kind of found his own way, kind of a different way than like what N'Keal Harry uses. And he's a bit more physical. He'll just kind of run into the corner and make them turn their hips. And then that's kind of when he'll break into his route. So he kind of is a little unorthodox for how he plays, but he's got really extremely reliable hands, and he doesn't drop the football very much. So that's something I really like. As you brought in your Devin Funchess, this year, as he's had his drop problems in Carolina, that you'll have a guy that didn't, in college at least, didn't have real issues with the drops. So he could be somebody that if Devin Funchess really inevitably doesn't work out in this 1-year deal, that hopefully going into the NFL, that Kelvin can not have a drop issue. And he just had a fun tape to watch. I think that he had a lot of highlight plays. He was a big-time player there. And, I think he's a great pick there at 59th. So, that's probably when realistically the Colts will be looking at a wide receiver. They'll probably not go with the 34th pick, even though I think that it might be a good idea. But I could see the argument that they would want to wait and get 2 defensive guys with their first 2 picks. So, looking at Kelvin Harmon's, cons, he's not really a yak receiver because he's, kind of slow looking at his 4.6. But, I think that he can come in and they can scheme him open and he'll find holes in the coverage, and that, maybe against man coverage and some speedy corners might give him some difficulties, but you already have your speed guy with TY, and I could see him bringing on another big body guy like this to fit in there. So that's one that I could look at the 59th. And then the third round pick for the Colts, the final pick of my mock draft here, I had Zach Allen, an edge from Boston College, coming to the Colts. This is another one I really wanted to talk about because I think he could be there. And I think that if you're looking to pick up another edge guy, that he could be a good fit. He's 6'4", 281. So a pretty good size there at the edge. I think he had a 5-second flat 40. So not bad at all for a guy of his size, especially. So I really like to see that coming from an edge guy. He has good football IQ. He doesn't overcommit on blitzing. Sometimes he'll not forget to set the edge. So looking at, the spread offenses in college, he had to see a lot of the option. And I thought he did a good job of setting the edge. And, even if that meant him not having a tackle, that would mean that they would just get clogged up in the middle, and he wouldn't give up any big plays there on the edge. So I think a lot of stuff that didn't go onto the stat sheet that he did a pretty good job at. He, came off the line. He had good burst off the line. I always look for that in guys off the edge. How fast are they getting off the line? And I think for him and for a pick here in the third round, I think this is a guy that you can really look at. So I liked him a lot. there were some issues with offsides penalties. I saw, I think he had like 8 of them last year or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was enough for me to see that as a red flag. But that's not even a red flag. He can just, get a little bit more better. He can get better at that, I guess. He had a hard time with double teams. He couldn't kind of split the double teams. So maybe going into the NFL, he can learn a few tricks of the trade. So maybe he'll get a little bit better at that. So I wanted to talk about another mock draft here today. Going through again, I got a lot of a lot of likes and comments about my last mock draft, and I really appreciate that. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe the pod. I'll be coming out with at least 2 podcasts every week, and I really appreciate you guys joining me here as we move more into the NFL draft and inevitably onto the 2019 season. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll be back early next week with another podcast.